happening. There's an yes. So, the recording is just started. So I welcome you again, Professor Paranjape. Let me do the introductions. Professor Makarand Paranjape is well known to all of us. He's a professor of English at JNU, New Delhi, since 1999, and has served as director of the Indian Institute of Advanced Study in Shimla. And of course, he's the author of various books and many academic papers and many articles. You're currently also a columnist. And, I've just seen some of your talks on YouTube. And my favorite one is about, I think you talked about decolonization, because that's sort of the topic du jour, sort of the topic of the year. We are really trying to look at it from a practical standpoint, especially with the sort of unusual life that has unfolded in front of us in terms of the academic Hinduphobia that has overridden our consciousness in the United States. So without much ado, Professor Paranjape, I'm going to hand over the floor to you to discuss the academic Hinduphobia. I hope you will bring some of your insights from India and your campus, experience at JNU, as well as what you know of what's going on in the United States, and also give us some remedies, some solutions of how we can, keep our flag flying high and keep our spirits high, and solutions to the whole problem. So take it away, sir.
Thank you, Richaji. Thank you. It's really an honor and privilege to be here. I've been listening on and off to the various speakers. It's been a very enriching and learning experience for all of us, I'm sure. And it's also created this tremendous traction and energy, because frankly, for many years, I've never seen an event like this, certainly never online. And the kinds of speakers you've managed to include in this two-day event, it's been a marathon, as you said. So I congratulate all of you, your team, and I don't know how you're keeping up day and night, all of you. And I also want to thank and congratulate the hidden or not so well-known movers of this entire exercise. And I'm sure one of them is Mr. Rajiv Verma, whom I know, and many others who've been working silently and countering these really, I would say, pernicious and false narratives about India and about Hinduism. So congratulations and thank you, all of you. Now let's come straight down to the topic of academic Hinduphobia and what we might do. The first thing to acknowledge is that this word or phrase, academic Hinduphobia, was made popular by Shri Rajiv Malhotra, whom you had earlier on your program. I've known him for more than 20 years, and I think you introduced him as a lone ranger of sorts. Indeed, so he was the one, we can look at his book. The book is also called Academic Hinduphobia. He talked about how he created these listservs. I was a part of all of that, including a very important conference in upstate New York in Woodstock, which was organized in collaboration with Bob Thurman and Columbia University. In fact, Tom Yarnell, who worked with Professor Thurman, and I, who worked with Bhaiji, with Rajiv Malhotra, were the ones who, put this conference together, quite a bit of it. Anyhow, so all these memories come back to me, but it was Rajiv Malhotra who flagged how dangerous and how toxic a certain kind of Indic studies or Indology was that was coming out of the premier Western universities. And he named names. He talked about Wendy O'Doniger and several other people. And right now, right now, meaning the last 4 or 5 years have been dominated by his countering another very famous professor, Professor Sheldon Pollock. So now the thing that we have to contend with here when we talk about academic Hinduphobia is that it functions at different levels, and we have to look at its origins, its intentions, and so forth. And we are always told that we should do Purva Paksha. what this really means is quite different from what many of my friends think it means. Purva Paksha really means presenting your opponents or the people you're trying to refute at their best. So when someone says, "Aapne uska Purva Paksh kiya hai," uska matlab very different hota hai. Jo aap soch rahe ho, wo matlab nahi hai. Actually, it is presenting Indology. If we are trying to oppose Indology, we have to present Indology at its best, not at its worst. Otherwise, we'll be demolishing a straw man. So let me try to do that. If you want to decolonize, you have to understand this project called Indology or Orientalism in a better way. Now, of course, this was the West trying to study us, and it had different proponents, different time frames. It started in the late 18th century when British power started consolidating itself in India, and it changed its contours, it changed its major, you might say, predilections or its major preoccupations as time went on. And the British wanted to subdue India, not just to conquer it, you see. So Indology also changed course. So as Edward Said said, and before him, Michel Foucault, and even before him, there were other theorists in the West who talked about the nexus between knowledge and power. Nietzsche was one of them. And if you want to take it even further back, it's a very important theorist, or you might call him philosopher, Giambattista Vico, who talked about the methodology of understanding humanities, which was very different from understanding the sciences, because sciences require experimentation and rationalism, and they go by certain epistemic protocols. But humanities is a matter of interpretation. It's really a matter of hermeneutics. And therefore, it requires a different methodology. So Vico, whom Edward Said mentions in his path-breaking book, Orientalism, published by Random House in 1978, is actually countering Descartes, because Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." And actually, other thinkers said, no, it's how you think that influences your view of reality. So these are some very important distinctions that we have to bear in mind. And in more recent times, Vishwa Adluri and Joydeep Bakshi have tried to tell us about German Indology. And he's used Nietzsche a lot, because Ne Science is actually a Schlesha. That is, it refers to a book by Nietzsche called The Gay Science, okay? But let's not get very sidetracked. The real important point that I think I want to make, which may not go down well with a lot of people listening to me today, is that we have to acknowledge that Western scholars of Hinduism did a lot, an enormous amount of service, seva to Sanatan Dharma and to our ancient culture and to our ancient civilization. Without them, I'm afraid that Indian modernity may not have been possible, because the amount of expertise that we had in our own tradition by the end of the 18th century was restricted to a very small group of people. Even the knowledge of Sanskrit was not all that widespread. And I'm afraid today in India, the situation is even worse. I don't know how many people there are who can read an ancient Indian text in Sanskrit or Prakrit or Ardhamagadi or any other Indian language, including Persian, which was an Indian language under the Muslim rule for 700 years, with any degree of expertise, okay? So we are losing our understanding of our own texts. We are relying on secondary and tertiary material. But there was a very important moment, a conjuncture, when under colonialism, the Indian past, with all its greatness and majesty, was rediscovered. And the British gave us some space in which this could be done, because under Islamic rule, there was a systematic dismantling, I'm using the word of our opponents today, of Hindu centers of learning. All these centers were destroyed. Kashmir was destroyed first. Kashmir was the crown, it was the you might say it was the the apex, the greatest center of Hindu and Sanskrit learning under kings like Lalita Aditya and many others. But after Abhinav Gupta, and after the Islamic conquest of Kashmir, which was around the 14th century, late 13th, 14th century, that entire civilization was destroyed practically as a center of learning. And there was a great migration of the knowledgeable people. Some went off to Tibet and others went to Banaras. Earlier, Nalanda was destroyed in 1193, 94, 95. The Khilji hordes, they burnt this great university, and the library, the contemporary accounts say burned for many, many months. There were so many books that were destroyed. And even earlier, there was a systematic destruction of Hindu centers of learning. When Devgiri fell, Malik Kafur, he conquered, he was a Hindu slave of Alauddin Khilji. He conquered Devgiri, which was later rechristened Daulatabad. And there was a very important center of Sanskrit knowledge and learning nearby called Patan, which was destroyed, and the Pandits fled. Many of them fled to Banaras. Later on, Aurangzeb tried to destroy Banaras. So this was a systematic destruction of these centers of learning. And let's not forget that all these universities or centers of learning, pathashalas, they required royal patronage. And when Hindu kingdom started falling, you can imagine that the patronage was cut and the funds were slashed, and therefore Sanskrit learning declined. Now, some people disagree, but I think they're politically motivated. In fact, the situation was really bad, that many times the manuscripts which were in the homes of these families of scholars, they were moth-eaten, the worms were eating them, and there was a tremendous sense of scattering of this knowledge. And today we know that some of this knowledge is being reconstructed through Tibetan manuscripts. So this is that story of what happened in the so-called Islamic interregnum of India. And there's again scholars who say that the Mughal emperors patronized Sanskrit knowledge and scholars, but this is, I think, few and far between. The reality was rather different. But there were some Hindu kingdoms, including Orcha. Orcha was ruled by the Bundelas, and they patronized Keshav Das, they patronized many of the Braj composers. And this is how Indian literature, Indian culture survived in these difficult times. And then the Marathas did it, and then the Rajputs did it right up to recent times. And the Gaikwads and the Scindias, they patronized our knowledge systems till recent times. But under the British, there became a class, there was a class of educated Indians who also started working and reviving our ancient knowledge. But the sad thing is that in today's post-independence India, things are so bad that, major editions of Sanskrit works in India are not done by Indians anymore. Most of this work is done abroad. So what I want to say is we must acknowledge a lot of very good scholars who are not necessarily anti-India, anti-Hindu, or politically motivated. They were not all of them missionaries, and they preserved these texts and they helped us understand ourselves. And even today, the best translations of Panchatantra, Manusmriti, now there's a translation of the Rig Veda, which Oxford University Press has published into English. These are not translations we are doing in India. So the Purva Paksha means we have to give the other side its due. And in fact, the best of the other side are not on the other side. There are hundreds of Indologists in the United States, in Europe, in the other parts of the Western world, in Russia. I know some of them. In Poland, they're spread all over the world, who are great friends of India. In Japan, in Korea, in Thailand, in Cambodia, in China, in Singapore, in other parts of the world. There are, in Brazil, you'll be surprised, in Oxford, Cambridge, in other centers of learning, who are not only very respectful of India, but who are not motivated or against India in their understanding of India. So we must acknowledge this. And even as I speak, one of the best centers of Hindu scholarship is the Oxford Center of Hindu Studies. And I know how it was founded. It was founded by ISKCON devotees who were not Indian. They belonged to the Ford family, the same Ford family, who make motor cars, and whose other branch funded the Ford Foundation, which also did a lot of anti-India activity. So there are good scholars of India who are not Indians, and we must respect them. In fact, I'll end this first part of my talk by an anecdote, an example of one of the fellows, I won't take his name, who was at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study when I was director. And he was a great a student of Panini. He had a PhD in Sanskrit. He spoke Sanskrit fluently. He is an American scholar. His brother, he and his brother are both Hindus. They came to Sanskrit learning and scholarship through Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He's published incredible books and popularized Sanskrit knowledge today. He has a website, and he's the student of one of the great grammarians, American grammarians, Professor George Cordona. So there are these great scholars who are Westerners. We can't condemn them all. So what I'm trying to say is good scholarship about classical India and Sanskrit is still a collaborative enterprise, and it should remain. So the anecdote with which I wanted to end this section of my presentation is what this scholar told me, this fellow. He said many times he's attacked for being a Westerner and studying Indian texts. And he said, Makarand, what I tell them, I quote a Sanskrit verse which says that knowledge belongs to he or she who knows it. It's not the monopoly of any ethnic or geographical or cultural group. The best way to respect knowledge is to know it, is to study it. And I wish more people in India were studying their own texts, okay? And not simply fighting, and condemning without proper understanding. So this is the first point I want to make, in which we must, if you want a long-term solution to Hinduphobia, we have to produce better scholarship than the people we oppose, not just calling them out or condemning them or accusing them of bad faith or of Hinduphobia. But we have to produce better scholarship, better editions of our work than they have done. And this is not a short-term project. It takes 20, 30, 40 years. You have to invest in this. And I'm happy that there are places in India where this is happening. The Bhandarkar Research Institute, which has a great tradition of producing good scholarship on India, is still doing it. They're putting out programs. You can check them out on YouTube. They are informative, but also authentic and reliable. So the first step is to study our own traditions more thoroughly, more completely, more reliably, more authentically. And, because only competing knowledge will help us. It's not just screaming and shouting. Our work has to be better. But in India today, the atmosphere is such that we talk a lot about becoming the Jagat Guru, but we are not doing anything about it, hardly anything. In fact, higher education in India is declining. It's going through a terrible crisis, and we do not have a culture of excellence. And I beg to differ with Panditji, who said that caste consciousness is going. No, it may be going in the diaspora, but in India, It's far from going, because all the policies of the government and all our politics is based on caste, okay? Like right now, there's a demand for an OBC census. So when everything, and let me tell you, caste is impossible to tell, because there is nobody who comes with a mark from heaven saying you belong to a particular caste. So the only way to tell anybody's caste is find out what their parents' caste is and their parents' parents. And all of this, beyond a point, is indeterminate, because there was so much mixing, even if people didn't want to talk about it. You take, all the top names of the jatis, if you really examine the genetic makeup, there's so much mixture. And this is proven. Genetically, the so-called upper caste and the so-called lower castes are no different. And that is why somebody said we have the same DNA. And then everyone started condemning that remark. This is actually scientifically proved. There's not that great a variance. And this is exactly what Dr. Ambedkar said, that caste and race are totally different, and that everybody in India has more or less the same genes for the last 40, 50,000 years. So the point I'm trying to make is it is the British colonial reinvention of caste, which gave it a certain kind of ossification, classification, and continuity, which is now almost impossible to uproot, because caste has become a means of upward mobilization. So everybody wants to be backward today. So if everything is based on caste, jobs, reservation, and academics, then how is it going to go? It is not going to go. And I want to say this to all of us, that what the Constitution says is an exception, because the Constitution says we are all equal. It says the exception is those who are very badly depressed and oppressed should get the benefit. So that which was an exception has now become the rule. So we are going to go above the 50% ceiling. It's already happened in Tamil Nadu, in Maharashtra, and other states. So I'm afraid we are not facing up to our reality. I'll tell you why I'm optimistic, though I'll come to it later. So here's the first point. If you want to dismantle academic Hinduphobia, you have to produce better scholarship. To produce better scholarship, you have to create a culture of excellence, not a culture of entitlement and quotas, where you're constantly trying to appease different sections and place them as per some sense of past deprivation or some other criteria. But good scholarship does not respect any of these ideas of either political correctness or identity politics. And unfortunately, our campuses are rife with all of this. Now, the second way to do this, so the point I'm really making is that the strategy for countering academic Hinduphobia is very different abroad than it is in India. Now, abroad, we must distinguish between levels. The California textbook case shows us that we have to start young, because the portrayal of Hinduism in textbooks, whether they are in the US, UK, or India, is negative. Why is it negative? It's because of the missionaries and Macaulay'ites, very simple, who wanted to keep Indians divided and subjugated. This is our colonial legacy, and unfortunately, we have inherited it. And the Indian state, after being independent, has done less to counter this, than our savants and our historians did during colonialism. The great nationalist historians, including Savarkar, who wrote the Indian War of Independence, sitting in the British Library in 1908 and published in 1909, Jadunath Sarkar, Sardesai, all these people, including R.C. Majumdar, they were all writing during colonialism, and after independence, they were so disillusioned because the Indian History Congress, the top universities, got taken over by the leftists as a part of the quid pro quo, both under Nehru and later under Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So our university system was taken over. especially in disciplines like history, and we are still bearing the brunt of that. So please understand what has happened. Post-independence India is worse than the last phase of the Indian freedom movement when it comes to academic Hinduphobia. Now, what is it that we should do? We should start studying Hinduism in Indian universities. I'm afraid only a couple of universities in India have religious studies departments, Shantiniketan, but it's also studied under the aegis of philosophy, Banaras, and a few others. But this should be widespread. You know, unless you, in higher education, unless you study your texts and traditions in the best institutions in India, you're not going to be able to produce scholarship. And we have gatekeepers in India too. You know, you don't want to study Indian civilization in an integrated fashion. There are Sanskritists in India who are so afraid of having an integrated way of studying Indian pasts, where you have anthropologists, historians, and Sanskritists, you know, and people who are in post-colonial studies working together on projects. They are so afraid. And it reminds me of this, the account of what happened in Hindu college, which was in the first modern college in British India, founded in 1818, which later became Presidency College. And the English department and the Sanskrit department were in the same building, divided by a barrier, and they used to have running battles. The Sanskrit department was headed by none other than the great Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. And the English department had teachers like Henry de Rosio. And, you know, all these nonsensical attitudes of purity, pollution, and fighting over territory, abusing each other, all this was happening even then, which is still happening in different ways in India. So if you want to counter, people abroad and people in India, you have to be better scholars. That means you have to educate yourself. I'm afraid that our side is not that well educated, nor do they write very well. We have more than 50, 60 Sanskrit universities in India. But when Sheldon Pollock had to be countered, or when earlier Jeffrey Kripal had to be countered, he wrote a book called Kali's Child. And I used to edit a journal called Evam, and we published Swami Tyagananda's rebuttal of Kali's Child, the first ones to publish it. We also published rebuttals of Amartya Sen and others. Nobody will publish these pieces because everyone is afraid. So what I'm trying to say is the people who hate or who dislike Hinduism and who are propagandists against Hinduism, they are bullies, they are liars, they are propagandists, but who will expose them? Only those who know their own ideology, who know themselves very well, and who also know their enemies well. You need Atmabodh, you also need Shatrubodh. Shatrubodh hai nahi, because our scholars don't read Marx, they don't read Lenin, they don't read their texts, they don't read how systematically they want to infiltrate, they haven't read their history properly. So we have to educate ourselves. We have to build up our own bench strength. And only then we'll be able to counter them properly. And this has to be a collaborative effort. It has to be transcontinental, and it has to be an effort where we build coalitions just as they have built. Look at the Dismantling Hinduphobia, Hindutva conference. Look at the networks. All these are very powerful professors placed at the best universities in the United States, in Canada, in UK and elsewhere. How did they get there? They worked for 30, 40 years. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, they created post-colonialism, they created subaltern studies, they created these disciplines, they placed their people, they got them jobs and tenure, they sat on each other's committees, they created a bunch of students. These students in turn created other students, and they infiltrated all over. They didn't do this without working together and keeping other people out. And what have we done to counter them? Hardly anything. And if you come to India, if you say these things, people on your own side will say, oh, he's too controversial. So we are in a terrible state of disorganization. And I'm very happy that there are groups like Hindu America Foundation, who are very well trained as lawyers and professionals who can file lawsuits. I'm happy that there are people like Cordona, people like yourself, Richaji, who are working so hard, people like Nikunj Trivedi ji, people in UK, Inc. Now, this is a new generation of professionals, but we also need a lot of scholars. I know that Dr. Manoj Shinde has made a list of 500 scholars who can help us. We need these lists, and we need to create coalitions across cultures and countries and across different geographies. And we have to have a way to connect with each other. You just gave an idea that every few months we should have such events. I completely agree. So these are some of the methods that we have to use to counter the falsehood and the negative propaganda. I'm going to end because I think we should have Q&A, and I just don't want to keep talking. I think Q&A is really important in an event like this. I want to end by saying, here are the steps. First, recognize Hinduphobia, Hindu hatred, anti-Hinduism in scholarship, recognize it in politics, recognize it in different disguises as identity politics, as negative Ambedkarism, if you will, recognize it as you might say, weaponized information, as ultra-feminism, as attacks on Hindu festivals, as attacks on Hindu rituals, as attacks on Hindu ways of life, as attacks on ways we celebrate the food we eat, the clothes we wear, dot busters, sari shamers, 100 different disguises. Recognize it in Hollywood, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Recognize it again and again in Bollywood, where Hindu priests are shown as duplicitous, they're shown as cheaters. Recognize it in OTT platforms where Hindu deities are mocked. Recognize it in paintings. So recognize it, then call out denialism, call out negationism, and call out sophisticated disguises of this Hinduphobia. Ask for evidence whenever people make claims. Somebody just said the other day on Twitter, Savarkar wanted Manusmriti to be the constitution of India. And I said, show me where he said it. And my challenge to this gentleman got tweeted hundreds of times. And of course, there's no text where he says it. So ask for evidence. And whenever people make claims, say, please show me where this is said. Okay, who said it, and so forth. Then the last thing I want to say is that there are some, we need to build solidarity, which means that there are some ultra-Hindutva or neo-Hindutvaites, I call them. So they are more Hindu than you. And the moment you have a moderate position, like today I said that many Western scholars have done great service to India and done great work, including David Frawley. Now, David Frawley is acceptable, but a lot of others are not acceptable to them. But the scholarship is so immense. Now they're going to start attacking me tomorrow or tonight. So this sort of infighting is what other people will use against us. So we must be careful when we do this. So we must be open to many points of view. In fact, when people said Hindutva is different from Hinduism, and I said, why? And they said, well, Hinduism is very plural. I said, you know what? Hindutva is very plural. There are hundreds of different ideas of Hindutva, okay? And I can list 20 of them for you. So let's not homogenize. Let's celebrate diversity, and let's agree to disagree when we don't agree, but we must agree on certain common minimum platforms, okay, common minimum programs. All coalitions need common minimum programs, and our common minimum programs are to protect the integrity and, should I say, the unity of Bharat Mata, Bhavani Bharati, of the state of India, which is the custodian right now of this great civilization. We have to protect our diaspora, which has done so well, the most law-abiding, competent, well-educated, least criminalized. And this is called a threat, a global threat. How ridiculous can you be? So we have to protect this diaspora. We have to protect Hindus in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Afghanistan. All these were Hindu territories till just a few hundred years ago. We have to make sure Hinduism flourishes in all free societies in the world. And we need coalitions for that, for this. Hinduism, Hindu texts and traditions should be studied in all major universities in India. They should be advanced centers all over India. We should endow a Hindu culture fund for such activities. And we should approach the top Indian industrialists who have made so much money, India and abroad. Let them do something for Indian culture rather than endowing chairs in Harvard and Wharton and Columbia, and USC and Berkeley and elsewhere, which are so anti-India, so palpably anti-India. So these are some of the baby steps we can take, Richaji. I'll end here, and I think more will come out in a Q&A. And this is, not a one-time thing. We all have to work together, and we can't close this conversation. It's only beginning. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Dr. Paranjape. I think I totally appreciate your, showing us the mirror and showing us just some of the things that we need to sort out. I'm going to switch off my phone. It's echoing. Yes. So sorry about that. But yes, so we will take questions if you want to type questions or raise your hand. We do have some time for Q&A today. So please let me know. I think there have been comments, but not really questions so far. But I do agree with you. The fact is there is no ecosystem right now. The entrepreneurs, they want to, donate chairs and endowments to universities where, obviously it gives them a better name and better, frame for collaboration or contribution. So we really don't have that ecosystem. Am I right? We don't have our own journals where people can publish papers and sort of learn that learning curve, which you said, where we learn to write papers and peer review them and create that sort of body of work. Is that a very big lacuna? Is that what you were saying? Like, just to reiterate.
Absolutely. I would go farther. You see, Indian universities, especially in humanities and social studies, are being systematically undermined, if not destroyed. They only do politics. You see, they don't build any competence. And none of our governments, left, right, center, have done much about it, frankly. And we talk about the and it's a good document, but it has many, many flaws. The word quality is referred to about 35 times, but we're doing nothing to encourage quality. We should have genius schools in India. We should get the government out of these, government is it's the kiss of death, and the amount of money that's wasted on education in India. We haven't been able to educate our children. Government schools have failed. And then at the university level, we tinker with reservation as if we can sort everything out. We can't. We have to take this bunch of money, crores and crores and crores, build public-private partnerships. But we won't do it because we've got a crisis of governance. That is why we've got such bad, education in India. There's no education institution in India which is in the top 50 in the world. Why is that? Because we have throttled creativity, we have throttled excellence in India. It's all about political correctness, it's all about caste, it's all about reservation this, reservation that. And I'm afraid there's no political will, there's no seriousness, and many universities in India don't have vice chancellors. There's no clear thinking on this. Tomorrow the Harvard and Yales are waiting in the wings. They'll open shop, and people don't want to send their children to state universities anymore. They want to go to Ashoka and Jindal because they don't trust the education in JNU, for instance, because they feel JNU only does politics. So when are we going to improve? And these institutions, the cost, the amount of investment in them by the government, incredible. They're sitting on gold mines in terms of land and resources, but there's no accountability. And I think I'm one of the lone voices crying in the wilderness. IITs have survived because technology is a holy cow, pardon the expression, because the politicians don't interfere too much there. But the universities, my goodness, the amount of politics, interference, and neglect at all levels is shocking, is appalling. So unless we bell the cat, as it were, we are only deceiving ourselves, unfortunately, there is no seriousness about these important.
Dr. Paranjape, I just want to ask you about this new education policy, though, if you can weave that in. And also, I think you spoke about caste. Now, caste is sort of, institutionalized in India in many ways. It is part of the constitution. So we fill up forms in India so we are conscious of that aspect, whether you're general category or your the OBC or SC/ST and all of that. So, and that, like you said, has become a voting bloc. So I think those two questions, the NEP, do you think there is hope with all the changes in NCERT or UGC, and there is some political will, and it will take time. Like you said, it is a 2030, it's a long marathon, it's not a sprint. So how do you counter that?
I agree, but what we should have done in 2014, it still hasn't been done. And the education ministry, prior to that, the MHRD, we haven't done enough to put the right people in the right places. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that, all of these will remain pious platitudes, because I'll tell you what's happening on the ground. You need a very simple policy. For example, you should restrict reservation for two generations or 3 generations, or say that when your income reaches a certain level, you have to get out of this, or you have to do something else. Or if your father is an IS officer, you can't, get reservation. Unless you do this, you're just creating another system of entitlement and privilege unto perpetuity. But we are not serious. We just tinker and make some noises.
Right. It's a very difficult situation there because of just the politics of it.
Okay, but 1 minute. Right. Then you should be honest. You should say, look, we can't do it. We don't have the courage, or the timing is not right. Don't say we want to create excellence in India. You don't want to. Right. It's just sloganeering. Okay, it's just to make us feel good. But who are we fooling? India is not the best in any field of human endeavor in the world today. In sports, we are not the best. In science, we are not the best. In technology, we are not the best. In engineering, we are not the best. In manufacturing, we are not the best. In physics, we are not the best. In chemistry, we are not the best. In humanities, we are not the best. In Sanskrit, we are not the best. We are not the best in anything, nothing. But
I
we are
think you just
fooling.
said earlier that even in Indology, we are not the best.
No, we are fooling ourselves. I'm telling
Yes.
you, if we win a beauty contest, we win a test match, we win one gold medal in Olympics, we are over the moon. Who are we kidding? Indians do well when they leave India. All the Nobel laureates
Yes.
have left India after independence. Not a single Nobel laureate has emerged out of India. They're all abroad, okay? So we are fooling ourselves. There's no culture of excellence. We are not serious. These are just words. We just bandy words and we pat ourselves on the back. We export human beings because our best talent is exported. That is what is happening. And until we are honest, until we can see ourselves in the mirror, I don't think things will change. And I understand politics, it's a completely different world. And I don't criticize our politicians. Some of the best people, most gifted people are our politicians because it's so hard. This is not China. To stay in power in India is so hard. But, we do have bad governance. Every year the drains get flooded in Mumbai and Delhi. And how are we going to be the best in the world? We can't solve even simple problems. So please, let's not fool ourselves. We have to be very honest because Satyameva Jayate. Only
Right.
truth will triumph. But we are not honest. And we are not Bharatiya in that sense,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So I think we have one question from Rishabh. Rishabh, if you can keep it brief so that Dr. Paranjape can answer, please do.
Thank you, thank you, Richaji. Paranjape ji, you made some very pertinent points, and most important word that we are not the best, and when we go out, that maybe we are not good in all these streams you listed, but we see that all these streams, the manpower, the soft power is used are actually Indians or Hindus per se. When they leave, so what is lacking is infrastructure in India. So we don't see any initiative in the infrastructure, but we also see that the diaspora who is out, the first conference on Hinduphobia came out of the land of America, not out of the land of India. And that also gives the reverterates the same point you made. So how do we communicate? Because in the public discourse, we don't see the respect for academia because of the reasons, Marxists have done so much of the not understood the ethos of India, have used a certain language. So that there is a certain sense of a phobia also for this academic language, if I can use that word, in the public perception. And I am in the sciences and I see
I
there is a
think
lot of
Rishabh, let Dr.
yeah,
Paranjape answer.
there is a lot of talk happening on the bringing the more communication part of it, science communication, how to communicate it to make people understand better. So how can humanities and Indic studies can do better in making the language more palatable to the general public so that they start appreciating and using those vernacular languages instead of English to actually make your point. Thank you.
I
Some
think that's a good question. That had occurred to me as well when you were talking, that we need an Indic framework. And we are always trying to compete. We can never compete with the West. And, how will our own vernaculars?
Let me say there are many questions all rolled into one. And I agree that, up to primary education and other things should be in your own language. And let's not call them vernacular because that's a very pejorative word. But it's a myth to think that suddenly the cutting edge knowledge will suddenly blossom in all our languages. It's not possible, and we can't keep translating. So I'm all for promotion of Indian languages, but what is happening is there's a terrible backlash against English. This will cost us terribly. All of you are doing well because you know English. Frankly, if you lose English, you're going to really come down terribly in the world and even in India. This has happened in other countries, and China and others want to learn English, and we want to lose our language. English is only a cousin. It's an Indo-European language. Hum kehte hain go, they say cow. It's the same word. Hum kehte hain dwar, they say door. Unless you understand this, you become irrational. You become anti-intellectual. You know, let me say this, Hindi and English should be promoted on an all India basis, but let the states take care of their own languages. You can't keep translating things. We'll step back. Everybody should learn these languages. Now, today you'll say, I know only Tamil, you teach me in Tamil. How is that possible? Tomorrow, somebody else will say, I know only Kashmiri language. In fact, the Kashmiris themselves don't know Kashmiri. They only speak Urdu. So, and Urdu, they say, we should only speak in Indian languages. But Urdu is an Indian language. You don't like Urdu, right? But Urdu didn't come from abroad. It was born in India. So we are all very confused about all this. I say learn many languages. Indians know 10 languages. I know 9 languages. What is the problem? Why can't you learn English as well? When you come to 10th, 11th, 12th, you must learn English. And if people say English is a stupid language, I don't agree. The knowledge of all the world is in English. It is the number one language of knowledge today. And if you don't agree with this, I'm sorry, you're fooling yourself.
There's the professor of English.
It's not because I'm a professor of English. What Sanskrit was 1,000 years ago, what Latin was 500 years ago, English is that today, okay? And
True.
if you don't recognize this, then you're fooling yourself. And
no, I totally agree.
No, I want to say one more thing. The vocabulary of all Indian languages is borrowed from English. They only translate. They translate from English. They have no, see, what they do is they only use Sanskrit words. But suppose you want to say postmodernism. What do they say? Uttaradhanikta. Where is the Indian framework? The entire framework is borrowed. Let me tell you, you cannot reinvent some Indic framework after 1,000 years gap. You can't. You have to move forward. You can't move backward. You have to read Sri Aurobindo. You read his book, The Secret of the Veda, where he combines Nirukta, he combines Sayana, he combines Max Muller, he combines Dayanand Saraswati, he comes up with something so incredible. We can't go backward, please. We have to go forward now. And this.
So, Dr. Paranjape, I want you to end on some really, some thought-provoking note, because I know we are sort of running out of time. I apologize to a couple of people who have raised hands and who wanted to ask questions, but I will take this opportunity to invite you to some of the webinars I do, and I will. Because within the same framework, I also do webinars, so this is a conversation which requires a lot more time, a lot more in-depth, understanding and study and discussion. So please, the floor is yours for the next 2 minutes.
Right, I will conclude because we must end at 11:30 for the next speaker, or maybe a minute or so.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to submit is that our political leadership does not have a very clear understanding of what needs to be done to improve the education system in India. They have some good intentions, but they do not have either the expertise or the clear understanding. It is not by putting out a new or a national education policy that things will change. Things will change when our institutions are changed, when they are strengthened, when we create an ecosystem of excellence. Things will change when the education system is reformed root and branch, not tinkered with. Things will change when we understand how important cognitive skills are by understanding deep language competency, which we don't understand. We think innovations means science. We think science means technology. No, these are entirely different things. Deep cognition can only come with great skills in language. Today, we have no appreciable language skills in India among the young, whether it is in Sanskrit, in Hindi, in Marathi, in Gujarati, in Punjabi, let alone in English. So this we don't understand because we devalue humanities, social studies. Many people say we should only study STEM. We think that people in computer science can study Indian texts and tell us what Bharatiya Parampara is. No, they may know Sanskrit, but they're not trained in hermeneutics. I'm not being a gatekeeper. And we are not doing the investment that is needed. And in fact, what happens in humanities and social studies in India is cut and paste. You go to any school notice board, they just do plagiarism. They copy from Wikipedia and nobody knows and nobody cares. So this may sound pessimistic, but I'm a great optimist. My optimism comes from the fact that only by confronting the truth can you make an improvement. And young people like you are not afraid to confront the truth. And therefore, I'm very optimistic.
Namaste. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Paranjape. And I'm glad that we had, a little bit of a, different point of view as well, because, we sometimes do sit in echo chambers and, have a lot of common sort of thoughts. But I think you are on the ground in the universities. You have seen what really exists and how much is changing